Welcome, everyone. This is the second of our Summit Series sessions. Some of you may have attended earlier today for the Holidays Act review with Sylvie and Sam from our partners in payroll, MyHR, used to be called FlexiTime. This series of webinars has come about after we had to cancel our summit, which is a bit of a bummer for me. I'm Jason, I'm CEO and founder of MyHR, for those of you I haven't met yet. The summit was our first sort of major client event. We've done a few client networkings over the years with smaller groups. We had a great attendee list. We had lots and lots of people coming from all over the country, actually flying in, hence the location near the airport there. But we just made the call at level 3. It's impossible to run, and even at level 2, it makes an interactive session like the summit just quite difficult with social distancing regulations, face masks and those sorts of things. So we really didn't want to run the risk, and some of our attendees were a bit concerned just as Auckland moves in and out. So such has been the nature of this year. I think we're about to roll over the anniversary of the level 4 lockdown. So it's a shame, but watch this space. We will definitely do it again. There's heaps of interest, and as an interim step, we've got the Summit Series. So thanks for tuning in. My session today is on performance reviews, and this is the kind of thing where I like a lot of involvement, engagement, and Q&A, because performance reviews are, of course, somewhat subjective and down to personal opinion and personal preference on how you manage these things. When I do the employment law seminars, it's quite easy because it's fairly black and white. I can tell you if something is legal or illegal. With performance reviews, what I'm expressing is our view, our opinion. It's not just based on something I have invented. This is based on quite a few years of practice as an HR professional, but also on what we understand to be best practice guidelines, and we've seen what has and hasn't worked over the years. So performance reviews, interesting topic. I will look out for your questions. There's space at the end for Q&A, but by all means, as we go through, please put your hand up or log a chat. I'll keep an eye on the bottom of the screen so I can answer your questions. So I'm going to share screen now so we can flow through the presentation I have prepared. There we go. Today's topics, what I'd like to cover in our 30-minute session today before we roll into the 15 minutes of Q&A, or maybe it'll be a full 45 minutes of sessions and Q&A if you like to talk as we go, are these topics. So firstly, why we recommend doing performance reviews. And that might seem a bit obvious given that we're an HR company and I'm running a session, but they are something that's come under fire recently. There's sort of been plenty of articles or press about the death of the performance review, about their unpopularity or ineffectiveness. So I'd like to address that head on and talk a bit about why and what has occurred. And we have our first question. Thanks, Maureen. What is the best way to make your performance review template and process aligned to your organisation values and internal culture? Yeah, that's an excellent question. So let's cover that in the alignment session, and if we don't get into it deeply enough, you can let me know. So why we recommend doing performance reviews, then conducting a quality review. So what we recommend are the steps you take and the things that you do to ensure that the reviews you're undertaking are good, not bad, because nobody wants a bad performance review. I've got a special note on pay and linking performance reviews to pay and why we do not recommend you do this. And I'll chat about that. And then our recommended review structure. It's fairly simple, but I think it's good that you see it and you see how we run performance reviews in our organisation and for our clients. And then, as I said, space for Q&A, but please, by all means, jump in and ask me questions as we go. So diving straight into it, why do we recommend doing performance reviews? These are the reasons, fundamentally. They keep people focused on important outcomes and align individuals to performance with individual performance with company goals. So this alignment piece is key, and the question from Maureen sort of alludes to this. How do you achieve this? Align people to the company's values, or the organisation's values, and align the organisation strategic goals and outcomes to those individuals. There are some things you can do, but the first thing you need to do is acknowledge that this is what you are trying to achieve. Focus and alignment is really important. Performance reviews go badly wrong when they're done in a vacuum, when an individual's reviews and the things that they are measured on don't really translate to meaningful outcomes for the business. And a person can work quite hard on something and find that they haven't really made much of a difference, and that's incredibly demotivating. They also support career development. It's an opportunity to showcase your best talent, to understand that talent, to assess them in an objective way. And often, the thing that I like that performance reviews do around talent management is everybody goes through them. So the opportunity to miss those quiet achievers is a lot harder when you have a decent performance review framework in place. It's great for those extroverts like me who are out there trumpeting about, all the things that they've done, but it's those quiet people who sort of underpin sometimes really good quality performance in your organization who you want to know about. And career development of those people is a bit easier when you're connected to them, and performance reviews connect you to your people. It definitely enhances employee engagement when it's done well. The absolute converse applies when they are done badly. They are an active tool for disengagement when they are badly done. And I'm sure you've all had that experience. You're doing a performance review because the HR team have told you, and you get grumpy emails at a certain time of every year saying, well, where's your report? And I need your reviews. And it becomes this kind of deadline task of check boxes and ticking and crossing. And it's just an absolute burden. It doesn't align to really any real achievement measures, and people don't feel connected to it. So they do absolutely enhance engagement, but when they're done well. It improves transparency and communication, because if you are aligning individual performance to the overall goals of the organisation, people need to know what those goals are. They are connected to those goals. There is some transparency in what we are here to achieve. That's enormously powerful. And I'm sure as managers and business owners, you've observed this. There is this increasing wish of employees to know more about the company, why they're here, what's my role, what's my purpose in this organization, and what can I do to help contribute to the overall success. Point 5 is an interesting one, and this comes from me as a seasoned HR practitioner and somebody who does spend or has spent a fair chunk of my career managing issues. Disciplinary type problems, poor performance problems. So this is not a headline reason, because it may make people very suspicious of you conducting performance reviews if you make this a headline reason, but it does play a part in the management of problems. Obviously, serious misconduct is not included. That's an act that somebody does, something they do that is so serious it results in a formal investigation and process. But where you have performers who are maybe average at best or consistently underperforming, a regular and consistent series of check-ins related to your performance review will help pick that stuff up early. So as HR people, when we help clients manage problems, one of our biggest challenges is the phone call that says, I've absolutely had it with this guy, Jason, for the last 12 months. He's just been all over the place. He's completely hopeless, and I just need him out of my organisation. He's a liability. And we look back over the 12-month history, and there's nothing in place. There's nothing that we can really work with. It's sort of escalated from 0 to dismissal, and there's no basis on which to do that without creating significant risk. In contrast, if you're having regular check-ins and catch-ups, you are aware of performance problems when they arise. And sometimes that person who you're frustrated with, had you actually dealt with the issue early on, they probably improve and they become one of your good employees anyway. Look, mate, you're not really achieving what we set. Why not? What's going on? What's the issue? We identify a gap in their training. We close that gap and they start to perform. That's a great outcome. And if they don't, and we do a bit more and we do a bit more, that good quality performance review is effectively like a bit of a performance improvement plan. And then we can use that as the basis to commence something a little more serious if we have to. So not the primary reason, but it is quite helpful from a problem and issues management point of view. And the last point there is to reward success. And by reward, I kind of mean recognizing it. That ability to sit down, opportunity to sit down with your team or your people and say, hey, well done. You did, you did really well here. I'm recognizing it. I'm acknowledging it. I'm aware of it. That's what I mean by reward. It's not necessarily related to pay or bonus. It's an acknowledgement of success. So what do I talk about when I talk about a quality performance review? What is a quality review? In my view and in our view and our experience, these are some of the things over the next few slides that meet that test, that cover those things. My headline and my intro to this is good reviews work, bad reviews don't, which might sound incredibly obvious, but it is important that just simply rolling out a performance review system or framework or process is not on its own going to solve the problems in your organisation. And as I said earlier, quite the opposite. If it's done badly, it can really have a negative effect on engagement. And by badly, I mean they don't really align to outcomes. They're heavily bureaucratic and cumbersome to do. They are filled with things that are not at all relevant to an individual's role, so they can't really influence their performance. And yeah, time-consuming and difficult is one of the hallmarks of the old school kind of corporate bureaucratic performance review that we put in that bad category. Alignment, again, I keep stressing it, aligned to business goals and aligned to each other. So your teams are linked. They're all working towards this outcome. And I made a note there in brackets, OKR. This has come up recently. It's been pioneered by Google to great success. OKR is a performance review approach that stands for objectives and key results. And it's a sort of two-step way, if you like. You would define an overall objective and then the key results that might fall out of that. I've been around a while, so I don't mean to sound cynical, but I kind of think that OKR, this approach, is what we do anyway, right? What we recommend is good performance reviews. The objective is this piece that falls out of your strategy, followed by those key results, which are the things that the individual can influence and do. So ask me questions if you want about OKRs as we go. The framework I'm describing fits an OKR model. Overall, performance reviews, simple and focused, not overly complex. I'll talk about this in a moment where we dive into the number of objectives you should have. When they are simple and when they are focused, they become very meaningful. You don't get caught up in arbitrary conversations about minor things, day-to-day management stuff. Fundamentally, performance reviews are conversations. So the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the measures, all of these things, the checkboxes, whatever they are, should not get in the way of your opportunity to have a meaningful conversation with your staff. That ability to sit down with them in a regular cadence and go, hey, how's it going? We kicked off this year thinking you were going to do these 3 things or these 5 things. They align directly to what I need to do as your manager, which aligns to what the company needs to achieve and how you're tracking. How do you feel about it? How can I help you? It's really powerful. And then you link them back to measures, but the conversation is the key. Reviews should be responsive to individuals and responsive to roles. So I talk about this a bit. Again, in the olden day history of bad reviews, there was quite a lack of responsiveness because they were rigidly defined. It's this, and we all do it this way. Every individual has individual performance needs and development needs. They should be recognized. Roles have different needs as well and different requirements and different outputs. And I'll talk on the next slide about there may be some roles in your business where you don't even set up a performance review for them. And then once it is established, in terms of a cadence, have regular check-ins. They really are critical. There's nothing worse than starting a review and then 12 months later pulling it out of the drawer or the virtual drawer, logging into your review system and looking at it for the first time and determining that half of it's no longer relevant and that you had kind of forgotten what you put in there. And this is an experience of some people. It just kind of sits there. HR told me I had to do it. It's done. Now let's get on with the real work and let's pick it up in a year's time when I have to again. At that point, there is really no relevance whatsoever to the review. That regular cadence, that regular check-in. And I'll talk a bit about what a good check-in cycle looks like. I have a question, anonymous attendee. Does a regular check-in mean that you have to sit down in a meeting situation? In our business, this does not seem to work. People nod along and just say what they think you want to hear to get out of the meeting. A more casual catch-ups ensuring a manager, the questions you want to do. Yeah, so casual is absolutely fine. I like actually when check-ins are casual. That's a really good question. So, and this all comes back to this flexibility piece, right? So the question there around, do we have to have a formal kind of sit-down meeting for these check-ins? The answer is no, not all the time at all. In some organizations, that will work. There's this sort of expectation that once a month or once a quarter, I'm going to sit down with my boss and I'm going to review how I'm going. And I think that's great if it works for the organization. To the question that was posted there in the Q&A, it doesn't work for them. So absolutely, go out for a coffee. Go sit somewhere in a less formal sort of way and connect and have a chat. Make it less staged, less kind of structured. And to your point there about the fact that the employee just kind of nods along, the manager, it's manager-led. Well, don't make it manager-led. Make your check-in employee-led. Go, mate, I need to check in with you, catch up on your review. I'm not going to say much at this one. I'd like you to front and tell me about how you think it's going and why, and just hand it to them. If they're not prepared to do that, one of the things I'd challenge you on is you may be in this space of a bad review, you know, something that's just kind of not relevant. They go, I don't know, you know, what am I going to say? You're the boss. I just want a pay rise. You know, I'm not, at that point, I'm not at all connected to the value of this review. So my check-in is a bit meaningless. But if I'm connected to it and I understand it, totally. And so try that, flip it on its head. When we come to this check-in, mate, I want you to tell me how you're going. And I'm just going to sit here and shut up. I'm here to hear from you. Talk to me about your results. So hopefully those, that anonymous attendee, hopefully those help you with some tips there. Another question from Maureen. Am I right in thinking there should not be any surprises in a review if you have regular check-ins? Yep, totally, Maureen. And that is part of it, right? Again, that surprise result where you haven't looked at it. You get to the end of the year and you go, okay, mate, well, you've pretty much, you know, failed on these fronts and this one's okay. Not a great year. Heck, where did that come from? You know, I've been beavering away all year, thinking I'm doing quite well, but I've had no real connection to the progress of those results. So surprises in a performance review are really not a good thing in any event. I mean, and that goes back to my earlier comment about issues management. Getting the letter that says, well, you're in trouble, when I had no idea I wasn't performing is not a good thing. So the check-in removes that surprise factor. So thanks, that was a good question. Should we be documenting these conversations? That's another question that's just come in. Yeah, I'm a fan of it because, and again, when you're using a system, obviously I'm biased, you should be using MyHR because it's great and a really simple to use performance review system. But the opportunity to keep those check-in notes is there, it's built into it. And I like it because if a review spans a year and you've got, say, 10 or 12 or 15 direct reports, it becomes very difficult to recall. And you as a manager want that kind of connection to it. And so I'm a fan of notes. I'm not a fan of overcooking them. You don't have to write an essay, but it's, hey, I checked in with Jason today. And you're in the meeting, right? So the screen is there, the goal's there, and you're raising issues or you're recognizing performance. Write that in. Jason's had a great month. We talked about ABC and I've given him some feedback that this is awesome. Or Jason came to the meeting today and told me that he's really struggling with the following. I've agreed to send him on a training course. We're going to check in next month and see how it goes. Those notes give you a really solid kind of record of how the year's tracked. And again, to the point about, you know, utilizing technology, you do it live as you're running it. So it's easy. Don't create an admin task after it. You know, you're already busy. You've got a job to do. You're taking 30 minutes out of your day to do a check-in with your staff. If you've got 15 staff, you know, that's 7.5 hours. There's a work day right there. You want to make sure you're doing this live and the meeting wraps and away you go, rather than conclude the meeting and then have another half hour of admin to do. So yes, to that question, I'm an advocate of keeping notes. This is all then about context and alignment and goes to that very first question about lining things up. And this is the fundamentals of the OKR methodology as well. So what's the organization context, first and foremost? What is the business plan? So if you're a slightly larger organization, medium to large, you've probably got a board, you're agreeing on what you're going to do this year, next year, and 3, 5, or 10 years out, depending on how you plan. If you're a smaller company, 3, 4, 5 staff, you still have a plan. What's my, you know, how do I want the business to grow? What does my pipeline look like? What's my exit strategy? When do I want to retire or maybe sell this thing? That plan informs what people need to do. So then what is required now to help achieve the plan? Because now is the period that this performance review cycle kicks in. Then who is responsible for achieving these things? So assigning that responsibility. So you're doing this, you know, you start at that level of organization and you work down into individuals. Firstly, then, when you're into that individual level, are the responsibilities clearly allocated? This is the point around relevance. Do people know what they need to do? And then as a manager, now I'm speaking to the managers or business owners, what are you directly responsible for? And then therefore, what is your team responsible for? So the company has some goals, some plans. They allocate out to individual managers based on their line of responsibility, and then that goes out to teams. And that's a hierarchical structure. I get it. If you're a flatter structure, it might be strategy straight to team. But for the most part, Most organisations, and certainly that we deal with, default to a management hierarchy because you simply need to start clustering teams and then they might need somebody to look over them. So business strategy aligns to manager goals, which aligns to team goals. This really helps with that question of relevance. I'm going to take the question, do these notes need to be shared with the staff member? Yeah, that's another good question. My view is yes, in the performance review, because it's transparent. You know, you're sitting there, we're having this conversation. I used the example that maybe the employee had brought some issues to the table and said, hey, look, I need some help with this, and we've agreed on a training plan. You're typing that in the meeting, and it's there as part of the performance review check-in that you've just conducted. Notes in general, just as an aside from a legal point of view, anything you keep on the employee, they are entitled to view and can require that you provide that information to them under the Privacy Act by giving you 14 days written notice. So don't let this put you off notes. You know, sometimes people go, I don't want to keep file notes because I might get in trouble. The trick is not the note, it's how you've kept the note, what you have said. So if you're capturing an issue, provided what you're writing is objective and fact-based, it's actually really powerful. So when someone requests their file, because that usually only happens when there's a grievance, what they can see is a very fair and objective tracking of the issues. You obviously don't leave notes that are insulting or defamatory. I really hate this guy, I want to fire him. That's going to get you in trouble. So similarly with the check-in notes, transparency, objectivity, clarity. So yes, share them is my view. This is a note on tech. So use technology to systemize the process and remove manual admin. I still see paper-based performance reviews, and it creates this model where you get to the end of the cycle, the manager makes an assessment, the employee does their one, you come together in a meeting, you have a third bit of paper where you're all scribbling, and you end up with this kind of scroll of outcomes that you then have to kind of systemize some way. And there are so many good systems out there. Ours is the best, of course, but use tech to help. The robots, but this is the statement we often use the robots to free up the humans so we can talk and engage directly with each other. So all the fiddling around and all the administration, to my earlier point on notes, you're making the check-in note as you're there in the meeting, discussing it with the employee. It's there, it's saved, it's done. You move on to the next meeting without always having an administration lag once you've done. And that's the beauty of tech. It will make your life easier. It's a tool, it doesn't do it for you. You still have to talk to your staff, you still have to address problems, you still have to remember to reward success, but use technology. And then this goes to my points earlier around identify who needs them. So probably not everybody. And again, in the old days, you do reviews for the whole organization because kind of HR told you had to. And there are just some jobs where it's not that relevant. There are transactional roles that just turn up and need to perform a position based on the day's tasks. And so in retail, where I have some background, that might be your shop assistants, you might have staff in your manufacturing facility or distribution center. And if you're in a warehouse, you need to, on a daily basis, pick and pack orders with a high degree of accuracy and get them out on time. You've got some responsibilities in inwards goods and responsibilities in dispatch. But the reviews are kind of day to day. Now, the supervisors or shift leaders or managers of that team may have some other tasks. They need to manage wage budgets, safety targets, customer outcomes. They need to contribute to, maybe repairs and maintenance or keep an eye on plant and equipment. And so those people may have duties over and above that make sense to have a performance review. But the staff that do the day to day are probably not relevant. So don't feel that you have to roll out reviews to everybody in one go. This can sometimes cripple you if you've never done it before because you've got such a kind of massive task to manage. So start with those teams that have broader responsibilities than just individual daily tasks, is my advice if you've never done them before. And identify the best cycle. I just put this in there because, again, technology can help you be flexible. Most people do an annual cycle. So let me be clear here, 90% of the performance reviews we see is to an annual cycle because it aligns to the financial year. But 10% of them, we have some clients who run a quarterly review. They start and conclude a full review every quarter because that's how they run their business and that's how they plan and that's how they transact. There's a quarterly wrap and then they kick off the next quarter. And we have some businesses, especially those involved in major construction activity, where there might be a project that runs for 18 months, maybe 2 years. If you're already having project milestone meetings with that team and you're managing them to this outcome based on budget, based on deliverables, wrap that into the performance review. You know, this idea that it's this separate HR process is crazy. You're just doubling up at that point. So it may not be an annual cycle. Be open-minded to something that is maybe more aligned to the individual person. And it can be different in the organization. You may have 50% of your company just run at a financial year cycle, and there's some project teams that run at a different one. This is the beauty of tech. Technology keeps that all in check for you and reminds you of that. A quick note there on mindset. I like people going into this when I coach managers and business owners around this expectation to succeed. So those of you that know me and have seen me talk, I'm not the fluffiest HR person out there, but I tend to deal with a lot of issues. But this is the one where I kind of get, I guess, a bit fluffier in that regard. And that is, don't expect repeat. Don't take this old school approach of you need to prove to me that you're worth the job I've given you. I've hired you, so now I'm going to sit back and away you go. Flip that on its head. Think like elite teams think, whether it's sports teams, whether it's, you know, cultural team, whether you've made it into the symphony orchestra, whether you're on Team New Zealand, whether you're in the All Blacks, doesn't matter. When you arrive into these elite groups in the arts or in sports or anywhere, you are charged with an obligation to succeed. People don't go hands off or you prove it. People give you the support you need to do well. You've made a hiring decision. You've recruited somebody into a role. Back them to succeed. And it's just a slight mindset shift, but I find it quite powerful in terms of engagement of employees. So a special note on pay reviews, because this often comes up. So we recommend, and most best practice HR professionals recommend, that you do not link performance reviews directly to pay. And this may surprise some of you, it may not, but why, I often get asked. So I thought I'd address it directly. Pay rates are determined by a number of factors, right? Of which performance reviews are one. So pay rates are determined in your company by external market relativity. So what does the market pay for these jobs? Because if you're out of whack with the market, if you're grossly underpaying, you're not going to get good talent. If you're grossly overpaying, well, you might actually find that some of the people who aren't that great don't want to leave because they can't get that pay elsewhere, and you don't have decent kind of pipeline management. Internal market relativity and pay equity. This has always been a consideration, but even more so now that there is legislation directly linked to pay equity and transparency around pay equity. So what are like-for-like roles paid in your organisation? Your company pay philosophy. So we do quite a lot of work with not-for-profits, and often they don't have the budget to pay private sector rates. But what they offer is something quite powerful in terms of an ethos and the ability to be part of something that's quite powerful, to do good in the world, if you like. Or you might be a corporate, you might have a company philosophy that says, look, if the market median's here, we're always going to pay at, 75% or 75% to median, or we're going to always pay at 110%. We want to pay above market or we want to pay below market. Your philosophy influences pay. Your overall benefits package. You might offer 8% KiwiSaver contributions. You might offer company vehicles. You might offer a really generous training budget. There might be bonuses. There might be share options. All of these things roll into the overall package of the individual. There is general performance and conduct. This is the day-to-day stuff. So you're not going to necessarily have in your performance review things about how you turn up to work on time and don't be mean to people. If someone is like that and you're managing, you have disciplinary issues throughout the year unrelated to the performance review, they need to be addressed. And that won't necessarily come up in performance review, but it's part of the overall picture. Length of service, the law, there's obviously a minimum wage to factor in, and there are soon to be fair pay agreements, which will determine what and how you pay in certain sectors. Company performance. If you simply can't afford to pay more, then that is a consideration. And lastly, performance review results. So the review is part of the discussion, but it's not the whole picture. I'm going to just see, I have a question. In terms of not everyone needing a review, take for example a kitchen hand. Day to day, so may not need a review as such, but would be good to help them grow and be able to offer paths to better roles. Yeah, thank you, Raylene. Actually, that's a really good question. So and it's kind of called me out of it, because what I don't want to do is say that there is a level of role that doesn't need a review. You know, they're junior, they're transactional, they're a kitchen hand, or they're a factory worker. That wasn't at all what I meant, actually, and it probably came across that way. This value of performance reviews around connecting to individuals and growing a career is enormously powerful. And so absolutely, if that kitchen hand or your junior team are people that you want to draw from in terms of talent, then they absolutely would qualify for a review. That ability to sit down and talk to them. And if a kitchen hand puts his hand up or her hand up and says, I'd like to be a chef one day, knowing how difficult it is to find chefs, what a great opportunity to sort of fund an apprenticeship and get a qualified person in your kitchen. So totally, yeah, you know, it's not ruling out transactional or junior roles. It's just making clear that, you know, there is relevance in the review that you're undertaking. And if the outcome that you want to achieve is good succession planning and talent pipeline management, then totally roll out reviews to absolutely everybody. The key is just making sure that they are relevant, and I'll address the topic of relevance in the next slide, because relevance to role is important. If there are a bunch of things they're measured on that they don't directly control, that's when it loses a bit of power for them. So if the performance review links directly to pay, the reviews become a pay negotiation, not an honest, meaningful discussion process. And that's really what a performance review should be around. How did you go this year? What went well? What didn't go so well? And I want to honestly talk to you about these things, because the things that didn't go well, I'm not here to sanction you for them. I'm here to work out how we can avoid this happening next year, because a performance review is not a disciplinary. When they directly link to pay, you know, I turn up going, this is a pay negotiation. And, you know, any commercially savvy sort of person that fronts a performance review, knowing that the result will determine the size of their pay increase, will handle it in that way. And that detracts from the overall kind of value of a good performance review. Now, there is a special note. There always is. You know, we're HR. We don't like to be too black and white with things. But in some cases, the performance review results may relate directly to bonus payments. There might be sales targets where you have some specific growth, revenue, or profit-based targets, and you need to set some KPIs around that. So, you know, you achieve this much, or this percentage of growth, or this level of dollar sales, and we will pay you a bonus of X amount. There is clearly a direct relationship, but that is rewarding a very specific outcome. There may be other goals or KPIs that don't have monetary figures attached to them. So that's the special note on pay. When you hear HR folk go, you know, it's not a pay review, it's a performance review. And for a lot of people, they don't really know why. This is the sort of context I like to provide. So the review structure we recommend, this is the last slide. We've gone a little bit over 3, but then I'm answering questions as we go. So I'm hoping that's okay. We haven't had much drop off, so that's great. And I just kind of wish I could see you all and we were in the room together at Villa Maria talking about this, but never mind. This is the performance review structure we recommend, because it's simple, it's targeted, it fits an OKR model that we talked about earlier, but it also doesn't have to, you know, if you don't want to sort of use that modern terminology. And it's really straightforward. It has 3 parts. The goals, which can be called KPIs or objectives. I've seen one that says what I will contribute to my company or something like that. So really, you can call this whatever you like, but goals is a word we all understand. So these are the things that are needed to be done to be successful in your role, right? KPIs, key performance indicators, that sort of thing. We recommend 3 to 5 maximum, okay, and non-weighted. They are all important. So what do I mean by weightings? For those of you that don't know, some of these old style performance reviews, they might have, say, 10 or 15 objectives, and they were percentage weighted. And so objective number 1 might be worth 60% of the overall result, and objective number 16 was worth 2% of the overall result. An employee who was pretty hopeless at number 1, but was smashing number 16 is going to turn up and go, well, look, I got 100% of 16. And you're going, well, it's 100% of 2.5%. And at which point you're now having a maths argument, which has no real relevance to the whole point of the performance review. And at that point, there are so many things on that list that in 1 year, the expectation for an employee to have achieved all of those things just gets a bit ridiculous. And what I find is those really long-winded ones just start to include stuff that's a bit of fluff, doesn't really have meaning. And that's what facilitates a checkbox exercise. Did you display the company values as measured by the, you know, it's like, yeah, This is day-to-day management stuff, right? So no basic job requirements. Turn up on time is not a KPI. So that's an expectation of the job. And sometimes people say to me, well, how can I manage it if it's not in the performance review? And the answer is, well, you manage it by being a manager. Day-to-day performance is critical, and managing day-to-day performance is part of the job of a manager. And that doesn't necessarily relate all the time to a performance review. If somebody turns up to work and they're clearly grumpy and unhappy, and they behave badly, and they leave somebody in the office or in the workplace in tears, you don't wait for your performance review check-in to have that conversation. You go deal with that then. If somebody is consistently late in a week, you address that issue of lateness. So what's going on? This is becoming a problem. You don't wait for the performance review check-in. So it's separating performance reviews from day-to-day responsibilities. Your role as a good citizen in this company, my behavior, my conduct, that's a day-to-day thing. So the goals are these 3 to 5 things you will do to achieve results. I have a question. Do you have development plan templates online, Jason? We don't really have the templates online at the moment. We don't share them as such like that, but we can certainly work with clients to create them and to develop them. And the thing about development planning is it's obviously highly personalized. And so it's that, every individual comes with a skill set and comes with some skill gaps, and identifying their strengths and their gaps is a critical part to that. What I will say to that question, though, in terms of developing a template, there are a few things around a good quality development plan. One, they should be aligned to all of this. So your development plan here helps support the skills you need to help you achieve the objectives in your role. And it's this idea where you always challenge yourself. Are we aligned? Does my development plan for these individuals help improve the skills that I really need? Do I need to teach them how to be a scuba dive instructor? Probably not. I need to teach them these skills that enhance their leadership or communication style, which allows them to achieve their goals as a manager of a large department in my business. So I have a few more questions. I'm going to read them as I go, because I think we're rolling now into the last sort of 7 minutes of the session. What is your view on separating managers for performance reviews from salary reviews, i.e. separate people running them? Oh, Andrew, that's a really good question. I think there's definitely merits in that. I mean, I've seen that work quite well, but where there is clear connection with the pay review decision maker to the performance review manager. So again, it's this piece around engagement. So your performance review is a conversation. Your pay review is a different conversation, right? When you sit down with someone and you go, hey, we're at and this is more commonly aligned to the financial year, or maybe their employment anniversary. Hey, mate, we've looked at your pay and we've had this discussion. We've reviewed it in the context of all of these things, and it's been a great year for the business. And overall, you've done some great things for us. You might acknowledge the performance review, and look, the outcome is our sort of budget sits at around a 3% rise for everybody. I'm actually giving you 5% pay rise, or I'm rounding it up. I'm giving you 10 grand more a year because you're so awesome. If that's a different person to performance review, that's okay, Andrew, I think. But if that person isn't really connected to the individual, and they're like, they're sort of from finance or something, and they go, well, we've run the numbers, Jason, and you're not getting a pay review this year. You run the risk of disengagement at that point. It's like, well, you're not my boss. How do you know how I've gone? I've worked really hard all year, and I've worked really hard in some really trying circumstances. So my challenge to you, Andrew, around that is just context is important. The decision maker on pay reviews should at least feel like to the employee they are connected enough or qualified enough to make that decision. But yeah, separation is okay. Importantly, separate meetings, right? Next, I've got a few questions coming in now, so I'll work as we go. In reflection, for the past 12 months, would you raise the day-to-day issues that have been noted? Yeah, Ali, I would if they were sort of serious enough. Again, this is about making sure there's this idea of relevance and making sure it has some sort of bearing. If these day-to-day issues were significant, maybe resulted in a disciplinary, and it's like, look, Jason, over the last year, you've been pretty difficult to work with. I know you've had some pressure on you, but you ended up with a disciplinary for shouting at our poor dispatch manager, and these are the problems, and I need to address this with you. This is part of your overall conduct in the business, and this is a good context to do it. But if it's just the little stuff and the niggly stuff and you've dealt with it day to day, I'd advise not to, because it might seem a little bit, just a little bit unnecessary, a little bit nitpicky, you know. You're sort of going, oh, well, there was that time where you were late and then there was this time when you did this. I think if you've dealt with it and it's improved, you can leave it in the past and focus on the performance review. If it's something that is reoccurring and it's not been dealt with, or it was significant enough to result in an outcome, then I think bring it up at the review. So it's a judgment call. I'm sorry if I'm not giving you a straight yes or no, because we're dealing with humans, right? So it's always a little bit different. So Ali, I hope that answers that question. Maureen, I like including values in performance reviews. How well does an employee demonstrate the company values backed by example? Any issues with that? No, I don't have issues with that, Maureen, other than I sort of park the values stuff in the day-to-day. So I think it is good, especially if your values are relatively new. You've just sort of launched them. You want to, you know, remind people of them. But in terms of the values discussion, they're all about day-to-day behaviours. Are your leaders demonstrating them? Do we act as an organisation in accordance with the values? Do we call people out when they don't adhere to the values? And do we align our conversations, our team meetings, our regular catch-ups, our check-ins, and all these sorts of things with values? Are the values really, what they say, baked into the organisation? If they are, you may not actually need to articulate them in the review. But they can be there. Maureen, when you assess them, the subjectivity, you know, this backed by example piece, sometimes it can lead to quite a fluffy sort of conversation. You know, how did you demonstrate the value of inclusiveness? And you're sort of going, oh, well, I was really nice to Jason when he started on his first day. So, well, that's great. Kind of would expect you to be really nice to Jason on his first day anyway. So where it's really clear and easy, then by all means do it. And value links are critical. I'm an advocate of values. I'm not against them. I'm just sort of saying it might park more in the day-to-day management than the review, but certainly no issues, Maureen. And if it works for you, go for it. And last question, and then we're running to the end anyway, which is good because we're on the last slide. Should all directors plus practice manager be in the review for each employee? Ali, I don't think so, to be honest. I think that's a little bit overwhelming. It's kind of like performance review by panel at that point. So that's 3 people, 2 directors and a practice manager is you know, could be pretty intimidating. I think your performance review should be run with your direct manager, the person who is directly involved in your overall performance and who is responsible. So I would see in this hierarchy that you describe here, the directors are doing a review for the practice manager. The practice manager is responsible to them for achieving the outcomes that they've set. The practice manager is then tasked with setting the review for the employees that they are responsible for. And the directors trust that the practice manager is doing that, and they have that alignment because the goals that are set with the practice manager flow through to goals that are relevant to the overall goals of the company for each individual employee. My view is that's much better than a sort of 3-person review. That could be quite intimidating, and you might not get a good outcome. Another question's popped up. We're able to discuss some of those basic job requirements issues at full staff meetings. Should we be addressing those same basic job requirements individually so those don't become performance issues, e.g. technical staff adding their material and work notes to jobs so the admin team can do their part with that info? If it's not there, if it's a big problem. Look, I think that question, this whole thing of these kind of basic job requirements and the role of a performance review, I think you can, you know, and there's an earlier question sort of about this as well. I think where they need to be addressed because they're not going away, the performance review check-in is an opportunity to do that. But general staff meetings, reminders of what we do and don't accept in the organisation, that's a great sort of forum for that sort of stuff. You know, be really clear on what it is that you need. You know, in this technical staff question, cover it. Look, this is what's happening. And we either, you know, need this to stop and here's why, or we need this to continue and here's why. And then you follow up with individuals day to day. And then when you come together in your performance review, if things aren't improving, then you can address it in that check-in. It's an opportunity to do that. It's just not the primary place where you engage in day-to-day management. And I'm really clear on that separation, because I've seen in organizations where performance reviews seem to kind of become the daily management task, and it's just not. They will over time become really irrelevant, a little bit scary. Employees feel like I only go to a performance review so I can get told what I'm not doing well in my job. A good review has this, as I say, alignment from company strategy down to manager, down to individual, and there's this day-to-day, your role as a citizen of the organization type stuff. So we're nearly out of time, but I will just wrap this. If you have to go, by all means, we are recording so you can watch later. So these goals are those hard and binary measures. So Maureen, to go to your point around values, they can sometimes be a little difficult to lock in. So targets that you can achieve that can be measured in a fairly clear way. I'm a fan of the SMART acronym. It's old as, and people roll their eyes because they always hear it. But if you build objectives or goals or KPIs that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, you're writing a really solid goal. You're writing something that an employee can understand, and you're writing something that you can review and measure. If it's hard to do that, then it's not properly SMART. So, it's really those things that are measurable outcomes. The R, the relevance, is really important. So I'm not a big fan of the overarching company goal, and I often use the example of safety. So a company might come out and say, we have a commitment to safety, and we will have only this number of lost time injuries every year, which I also always found a bit funny, because you're kind of going, this is how many people we're going to hurt this year. But anyway, this is hopefully a number that is less than the number of people that got hurt in the company last year. And we have this overall safety goal. And one manager might work incredibly hard, go over and above, and she has adopted a real safety culture in her team. They have no injuries, and they've taken this wholeheartedly on board. Another manager may not really care and have a pretty poor safety record, in fact. But because the injury rate by this manager has affected the overall result, the good manager misses out and basically gets told, well, actually, it's a zero. You didn't achieve this. It's not relevant. It's out of her hands. She was the star performer in that safety measure, but the relevance of the KPI was such that that performance did not connect with a good outcome. So I think relevance is really critical, and this steps through that alignment, that company strategy down to manager, down to individual. What is the thing that we need you to do? It's relevant to you, and I can measure you on this, because if you do this, then it allows me to do this thing, which allows the company to achieve this result. And that is that kind of alignment piece. And then skills and competencies. This is where we can do some of the subjective stuff. So you might call this skills, values, and competencies. Maureen, this might be where, for example, you put your values statement. But you can include hard skills here, like training. You must complete certificate X, you must complete this license, etc. Or softer skills, leadership, communication, those sorts of things. The value alignment piece, because in here, your values alignment can be benchmarked against some of these harder KPIs. Well, you did or you didn't achieve this goal, and this is partly why. And then lastly is the personal development plan. So the activities that you will undertake to improve your skills and competencies to help you achieve your goals. So it is all lined up. So that's the session on performance reviews. Thank you so much to all of you for attending. I've addressed all of the questions as well. As I said at the start, I'm just sad we couldn't do this together as face-to-face as a team, but we will. So watch this space. We'll announce the event soon. If you have any questions, as always, please do get in touch with us on the website, through the phone number, or directly email us. And yeah, I look forward to chatting, and I look forward to seeing you face-to-face one day. Thanks so much, folks, and yeah, stay safe. Have a great day. Cheers.